Alright, so first video we did, we went through and actually tested, cleaned. Now we're going to take one of the boards and I'll show you guys how I install the screen mod. This works for the FunnyPlaying 3-inch M2 mod. Just getting all the parts out here. So it'll come with two different ribbon cables. One is for the 40 pin, the other is for the 32. This one is a 32 pin, you guys can see there. It'll say it right at the bottom of the connector. So we won't need this one. We'll keep that one. These are our wires we're going to solder. Usually what I do is I start with the screen, flip it over, and we have to connect the control board here. So lift up the connector, and we're just going to slide it in, snap it down, and then there's some double-sided adhesive right here. Peel that. Now, when you're placing this, from what I've learned from doing this so many times, you want to have a little space here. If you put it all the way to the edge, the upper ribbon cable won't line up as well with the Game Boy. So just make sure at the top edge, and you have a little space there, and just press down. Give it a good firm press, and then I usually just kind of bend this cable just a little bit. Don't flatten it, just bend it a little bit, just so it stays in place where it needs to. Now, this mod does come with a touch sensor. I'm not a fan of how it works. Since I'm soldering all the button presses, you really don't need this. And in fact, if you're touching the Game Boy in a certain way, you can adjust your screen settings without even trying it. So I go ahead and I just trim those off. Doesn't affect anything, it just stops the touch sensor from actually activating while you're playing and handling the Game Boy. Alright, so now we want to take this. You want to have your lettering faced up. That's what's going to go around into the top of the Game Boy. Let's lift this. And then we're going to slide this into this connector. And sometimes it takes a little bit of maneuvering. And you'll know when it's supposed to go in. You'll feel it. It'll slide in pretty easily. Just kind of give it a good little snug in and then snap that down as well. Alright, so the screen is just about prepped. Now, I put Kapton tape on the back of this board just because it will be close to the PCBA for the Game Boy. This just gives you extra protection just so there's no shorting, arcing, anything like that. Just put two pieces in here, and that'll give it good protection. Alright, so now we have the screen ready. Let's get the board. So the board, you're going to be faced this way on the board with the buttons face up. Now there's going to be three spots you're soldering to. First is going to be TP2 right here. TP2 is for the select button. That's going to pull up your menu. And then the second is going to be TP9 right here. And that'll be for this trigger. And then we have TP8, which is that one sitting by itself above the 2 right there. And that's for this trigger. So that'll give you all the options. You'll be able to scroll through the menu, pull up the menu with the select button, scroll through with left and right triggers, and then select what you want. Let's see. So first we're going to add some flux to each of these points that we're going to solder to. So I usually put a little bit on each one of these. There. That's a little more than I want, but that'll work. A little more cleanup at the end. All right, so you put it on TP8, TP9, and TP2. Now that those have flux, we can go ahead and take some solder wire, trim that. Okay. Alright. And what I'll do now, before we even solder the wires, I'm going to pre-tin the pads. So let's take our soldering iron. And we'll start with the screen. And we're just going to go in here. I'm going to use my magnifying glass. Makes it a little bit easier. Go in here. And just give it a good bubble on each one of these. That way we can solder those wires directly to it without any issues. Alright, screen is done. Alright, now I move to the board. Now these are a little tougher. They don't like to hold a lot of solder. So when you get in here, you're just going to want a nice little bubble there. It'll take you probably a couple times to figure it out if you're not used to soldering. But just get in there. Get that nice little bubble going. There we go, we got a bubble. And let's do TP9. There we go. And TP2. There we go. Okay, so now everything's prepped. And now we can actually solder our wires to both pieces. Now I usually start with the board just because it is the tougher one of the two. It doesn't matter which point you go from. I like to use tweezers as well. It's a tight squeeze, and to hold the wire just right to get a good bond is sometimes difficult. So just want to get in here. Now when you lay these in, there is a way you want to lay them so they're not going to sit underneath something that'll get pinched or go through a screw hole, because that hole right there is one of the screw holes. So if you're soldering and you put it like this, it's going to run right through that screw hole. Not going to be good. So what I usually do is I will take and kind of place it straight off the side here. And we'll get the soldering iron. And we'll get this in there. And get it good. If we can stop shaking here. Alright, there we go. Okay, there we go. That's on. And that's all it takes. We'll go over here. Usually do the select button next. Like I said, there's no real order to this. It's just make sure you remember which wires that you're soldering from to go onto the screen, so that way the controls work properly. This one I usually just send it just about straight up, and that'll get us a good pathway. There we go. And then this one you definitely want to angle in a certain way. So this left trigger, if you make it go directly off, it's going to sit underneath one of the poles for the case, for the shell, and that's a screw hole directly below it here. So I usually send it kind of at an angle, an upward angle coming off. That way it can go around the pole and stay away from the screw. There we go. Okay, so we've got all three of our wires soldered. The board is now ready. Okay, so we'll set that up here. Let's pull our screen in. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So these are labeled R, L, and S. So you got right, left, and start, or select, I should say. So it makes it pretty easy on knowing which ones you need to do. You just need to remember where you're pulling from. And the easiest thing is, this is your, since it's upside down, this is your right-hand side, left-hand side. So if you're taking, I usually start with my right. Let me get that in there. Make sure we're close. And then we're just going to, let me move this in. Get that angle just right. And I usually solder so they're coming down off the bottom. Just the way it curls, it stays out of the way of the shell, any pieces, and then of course the upper part. Let's see. There we go. And then since left is inside of select, I usually do left next. Get that one in there. Okay. And then select, you have a little less room, so I usually take and just pull it in just a little bit more, and we'll get select. There we go. All right. So now we have the left, right select soldered. Let's do some cleanup. So always remove my flux after I'm done, just for cleanliness and just makes it look cleaner. And if there we go, my IPA wants to come out. Okay, let's just slide that up. Let's just get in here, clean this all up. I put a little more than I normally would. Sometimes it comes out of the syringe a little quick, but it won't hurt anything. It just takes a little longer to clean up. All right, get that good covered with IPA. Okay, we'll take a dry one and just clean up the excess. Get all that cleared out. Okay, so this is pretty much ready. Okay, now we'll go to the board, do the same thing for the board, and just get those solder points cleaned up as well. Okay, all right, can move this out of the way. Let's get a fresh one. Just get in here, clean these up really good. Now as you can see, this wire is kind of going up. When I put the shell on, I'm going to have that wire sit just like this, so it's going to follow the line of where the ribbon cable will go. Same with this one and the upper one as well. But this will just come in kind of like that. And then this is the one, I'll show you in a second here. Let me finish this. Clean that up. Clean up TP2. And then TP9. Okay. Those are now cleaned up, so they'll dry and that'll be good. But yeah, I usually run it across here and over the CPU. This one I'll come in, just kind of lay it, just so it'll go underneath the screen bracket that we'll put in, we'll install. And then this is the one that I usually, when I'm installing, I'll kind of have it sit up in this little cutout and then go down kind of where this one's going to sit. This will keep it away from that screw hole right there, as well as there's basically a plastic pin that comes down to hold the board when the front screen is in place, that you don't want this to sit under and pinch. So basically you want to have your wires kind of sitting in there like that. And that's it. Now what I'll do next is, in the next video, I'm going to get a new shell together, buttons, membranes, and we'll be assembling the final Game Boy. But this was just to give you a quick view on where to solder for the FunnyPlaying M2 3-inch screen, how to set it up, how to set the screen up so that way it's ready and easy to install, and that way you're all set. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.